Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Ashley Conway. I'm the silvopasture researcher at the University of Missouri Center for Agroforestry. And I want to welcome you to today's chestnut roast, both virtually and in person. Since I am the silvopasture researcher, I'm going to give a short presentation about a little bit about what silvopasture is for those of you who are unfamiliar with it, and then talk a little bit about what we do know and what we don't know about silvopasture, and then touch on a little bit of the questions that I'm trying to answer with my research. So if this is a new term for you, silvopasture is an agroforestry practice that involves the intentional integration and management of livestock with forage and trees. The key to this system is that all three of these components are managed together. And this doesn't necessarily mean that you just put trees in with cattle or vice versa. All of the three components need to be managed equally and together as a whole system. I like to call silvopasture a la carte agriculture because it is such a flexible and robust system in the sense that you can really pick the best resources and components that fit with your landscape and the area that you live in. It's very flexible, it's very adaptable. This also sort of what makes silvopasture one of the more difficult areas of agroforestry and just agriculture in general to study because it's not very prescriptive. What that means is that I can't sit here and say this is the right way that you should do silvopasture because it can look very different for a lot of different people, and what might work for one person in their space isn't necessarily going to be the right answer in somebody else's space. I call it the beauty and the curse of silvopasture. So from a tree perspective, the trees that you incorporate can have multiple different functions or just one of these, in the sense that you can plant trees and manage them specifically for timber growth. You can plant specialty crops like fruits or nuts. You can plant trees or use trees as a way of managing wildlife habitat, or you can plant them as an extended sort of windbreak or a shelter belt, or you can add trees to your system with livestock specifically for fodder, or is several of the above altogether. The grasses and forages that you include in the system can be combinations of any of these. So if you're looking for a warm season pasture, or something that's really going to offset your current forage resources, it can be any type of forage that really works well in your system, or a mix. This also goes with livestock as well. Depending on what animals you have access to or want to raise, you can really be flexible with how you integrate those animals into your silvopasture system to make it very functional. It can be cattle, it can be goats and sheep, pigs, poultry, or bees. Or other pollinators. So silvopasture as a whole is a really flexible system that can look like a lot of different things. What silvopasture is not is just woodland grazing. So just putting livestock, particularly cattle, into wooded areas and letting them do their thing. So woodland grazing is unmanaged, it's unintentional, and it really is only focused on one component of the system, in this case, specifically the livestock. So oftentimes woodland grazing, unmanaged woodland grazing can be very destructive for that forested area. This is the picture on this side here of a glade system that was livestock were allowed access to, and they really damaged that space because it wasn't being managed or grazed in a way that was beneficial for the glade. In most cases, we would say glades should not be grazed at all because they are so sensitive and so important. So there's really is a key distinction that I hope you take away, in the sense that some places are okay to be grazed. And if you only manage one aspect of the system, like the livestock, that's not a silvopasture system. So because of this, because woodland grazing can be very destructive, we have sort of a culture or policy in a lot of our organizations these days of livestock exclusion, because if it's not managed well, if it's not done right, then it can be very harmful. So this is sort of what I call fighting our history in order to figure out how to establish really good silvopastures. We have this history of excluding livestock, and of organizations and institutions saying, keep your cattle out of the woods because it's not going to be good. And this really stems back to one of this article here by Daniel Deneuel in 1945. There were a couple of other papers that came out at the same time that really provided some very good data for the time about why animals should not be allowed in wooded areas. There was very little forage production. The cattle didn't do well because there was not enough forage production for them to graze well, and ultimately caused a lot of erosion and compaction and tree damage in that system. So a lot of policy that is currently around these days that sort of promote excluding livestock is based on this historic trend and this historic policy that we've carried forward. I think nowadays we're starting to see and ask questions about how can I actually incorporate livestock back into my wooded areas, because we're seeing that total exclusion isn't necessarily making our woodlands healthier. There's other aspects of this, including fire management and invasive species, which all kind of play together, but incorporating animals and excluding animals does have a role in that conversation. So what this looks like here in Missouri, this is probably a pretty familiar site. This are some pictures taken down near Rolla, where it's very common to see open pastures that have been planted and are grazed regularly. And we have these woodland edges, these forested edges along the pasture, and they're fairly overgrown and rife with a lot of very small stemmed young species. There's a lot of invasive species at times, some autumn olive and multiflora rose, etc. And the question that I hear from a lot of people is, how can I turn these forested areas into a grazable space that's functional and that looks like silvopasture? Again, the key here is that silvopasture must be intentional management. We're not just going to tear down this fence here and let the cattle go in and have their way with the space and assume that that's going to make this forest healthy or this woodland healthy. It really needs to be very intentional. So you can see very clearly here a straight line from where this landowner has been carefully thinning and seeding and selecting trees and planting. I believe this is an orchard grass and clover mix to create and sort of grow a silvopasture that was taken from these woodland areas. And on the other side, what was there originally. So this is what he started with, and this is what he's working towards. At this point, this wasn't very grazable. I did suggest to him that he wait a full another year before putting cattle out onto this in this silvopasture. But again, the key here is that this is an intentional management. We're not just letting the cattle in to run around and cause damage. Every component, the trees, the forage, and the livestock are all being selectively managed. So this brings us to how to really do silvopasture. And this is an important point to say that there's really two key main areas, I would say, of how to create a silvopasture. The first spot is what I would call a natural silvopasture or a woodland restoration conversion silvopasture. This is taking an already wooded space and thinning it out, whether mechanically or with herbicides, with fire, and really opening up the canopy quite a bit, maybe underplanting some forages, and taking essentially already wooded spaces and restoring that space into a functional, healthier ecosystem that also will facilitate some grazing. The second strategy is to take open pastures like this one here and plant trees into that pasture. Those trees will need protection, but then ultimately we're adding trees to the landscape that we can manage for specific purposes, whether that's fodder or timber or food products. There's several advantages to silvopasture, and the literature going back and research involving silvopasture goes back quite a ways. So research has been done for quite a long time, both in Western science and in traditional knowledge of grazing systems with trees. We have some pretty clear data so far that silvopasture can enhance a lot of soil characteristics, both physical and chemical soil characteristics. It can improve the nutrient retention of the soil improve water quality of the system, enhance environmental biodiversity of the landscape. There's advantages to the livestock component as well. So when silvopasture is managed well, you can see an improvement in forage quality, which will improve livestock performance. The other factor in that is by providing shade, you will sometimes see improvements in livestock performance because they have access to shade. In some systems, they've observed that tree growth and timber quality has been improved in silvopasture compared to ungrazed systems. And there's some advantages to animal health as well. Economically, there can be benefits when in some instances as well. So just the very fact that you're increasing your revenue streams, you have improved revenue diversity by selling, let's say for instance, if you are growing silvopasture for timber, you have a timber income stream, and you also have livestock at the same time that can kind of offset that initial capital investment while you're waiting for your trees to grow and be harvested. There's some papers that show if you look at land use efficiency as an index, silvopasture has a much greater advantage over just single enterprise systems. So overall, this is not comprehensive, and I want to be clear that this isn't always seen in every case. Again, going back to how flexible and adaptable silvopasture is, not every system will see all of these benefits and advantages. But this is at some point or another has been observed in a silvopasture system over a conventional, what we would consider a conventional livestock or agricultural operation. So the questions that I hear most often are not so much, is this a good idea? I think most people who are aware of silvopasture think it's a really good strategy, and they really want to know how do I do it? Where do I begin? Because this is something that I want for my space, my landscape, my property, and I want to know what I can do to create a silvopasture. And really, this does depend on so many different things, but the biggest first question that you need to ask yourself is, where's my starting point? Am I looking at taking wooded areas where the trees are already grown on my property and converting that into a silvopasture, or do I have an open pasture that I want to add trees to? This will really inform where to begin and how you do it. There's some overlap, but knowing your starting place is an important thing. So the number of questions that I have about how to do it, I want to be as informed by scientific research as possible, but we still are really lacking for a lot of this information to provide some good solid recommendations for producers. So in my position here at UMCA, I am trying to build a program that can really help answer a lot of these questions that all come back to this one question of how do we do it? What's going to be the best forage to plant? How do I space my trees? When do I graze? These are all practical questions that we really are still trying to find out really good answers for. So my goal is to really develop a comprehensive research program around silvopasture that addresses a lot of these applied questions and basic questions as well for these two types of temperate hardwood silvopasture systems for Missouri. So this means that a lot of my research questions are focused on, again, these two different strategies. The first one being converting and improving native woodlands that are unmanaged currently to improve them and create a woodland-based silvopasture as an alternative to to unmanaged grazing or unmanaged woodlands. So finding woodland silvopasture as a sweet spot between these two different states of no management. The second questions really revolve around this plantation style silvopasture, asking questions about timber quality, how to do specialty crops, and then some even smaller scale silvopastures, highly integrated. What types of forages and fodders can we incorporate on a smaller scale for small landowners who are interested in silvopasture? Some of these questions include how to thin trees appropriately. We have some indication of how best to do it. But based on what your site is, the answer might look different. So it's always best to consult with a forester at this point, and we'll give you the best information as possible. But all of these factors kind of go into that question. What is your site suitability, your ecotype, your soil slope, what kind of accessibility do you have? And then it's important to consider what species and what your stocking rate is going to be, essentially what to keep, cut, and add. You're going to want to decide on a harvest method, whether that's going to be mechanical, chemical, or natural. And you're also going to have the risk of having some secondary impacts. For instance, when you open up that canopy, you could have an effect in the following year of releasing some invasive species or potentially creating some soil compaction from that mechanical harvest. So in our research, we're trying to really understand what's going to be the best strategy with a silvopasture in mind of how best to thin your trees appropriately. In doing this, you really want to define what your target ecosystem goal is going to be. Are you really looking at creating a very productive, more forage intensive silvopasture? Or are you more interested in really a woodland restoration where you use livestock very lightly as a tool for managing that landscape? That can inform how you go about this and then how you manage that. I always encourage people to have an invasive species action plan, be aware of what you have on your property and what can be spread or grow as a result of this action. Always try to avoid excess soil disturbance and compaction, and then understand that this strategy is really a long-term strategy, that you're going to probably have lighter and more regular thinnings on that space compared to traditional forestry, which might have a heavier thinning but be like a 30-year interval or something similar. So understand that it's going to be something that's constantly going to need to be managed, and that you're not just going to be able to go in and thin it and then leave it. The woodlands need to be managed continuously and consistently in order for this to be successful. So really, this sounds like a lot of work. So where is the advantage? There's a sweet spot, I think, that we're really trying to find and define for producers, that is woodland silvopasture, where we look at managing forests and then managing productive agriculture land, such as like pasture, and really find the sweet spot in between these two. So in some cases, we do see with livestock that there's improved timber management, reduced invasive species, and ultimately some evidence that we have a managed productive biome, a good functional ecosystem, whereas before it's either been not managed at all or managed very improperly. So the goal here is really that we can use silvopasture as a goal to reach this happy sweet spot for our wooded areas, and actually, produce food products off of that, make that land not only ecologically viable and healthful, but also create some healthy food for us. I won't spend too much time talking about the design aspects of silvopasture. This is again for that type of silvopasture where we're planting trees into pasture. I like to really offer it as a way to rethink conventional livestock crop production, where the animal feed products are kept separate from the animals, and they're very spatially separated and distinct, and really looking at integrating these two things together. The benefits can really be enormous. Adding trees to open pasture can improve biodiversity, it can improve forage quality, open up all these economic avenues. The shade will improve animal performance, and it does improve forage quality as well. Timber growth can be positively impacted. All of these benefits really create a multifunctional system, which is why I have an Instapot here as a picture, because this one device can do so many different things. It's a multifunctional kitchen gadget that I really love. And I find it to be a very good analogy for a silvopasture system, because you have multiple goals that come out of it and multiple benefits that come out of it from this one space. It's an integrated multifunctional space. Similar to the woodland silvopasture, management is key to success for this type of silvopasture as well. You're going to want to consider what sort of forages you are planting, what does the ecosystem need, what do your animals need, and then what type of trees are you interested in planting? Are you really looking at growing pine for timber, or are you more interested in pecans or walnuts as a specialty crop, or some type of service tree that's providing shade or fodder for the livestock? And then consider what sort of economic returns you can expect from each of those types. In this type of system, and all silvopasture systems, your grazing planning is critical, and it's very important to have what I like to call a parachute plan. Always have a space that you can pull your animals off to when your silvopasture needs rest. This is very important. I always recommend rotational grazing, and depending on the size and scale of your operation, that can vary between like what that looks like. But you're going to want to make sure that you don't overgraze those pastures, because you're likely not going to grow as much biomass in a silvopasture, but it is going to be of higher forage quality. It's going to be at greater risk for being overgrazed than what you might think of a conventional silvopasture, a conventional open pasture to be. For all of these systems, animal management is probably what people think of first, but I always add it as like the last part, because it's the thing that people keep in mind, because it's the first thing that people think of, but really like the space itself should be managed, I think, first and foremost, and then animal management comes along. You're always going to want to have a nutritional plan that includes what type of forage production your system can provide. Do they need any supplementation? Again, that you need a non-grazing season plan. If that silvopasture can't sustain for a period of time, you're going to want to be able to offer your livestock hay or stockpile forages, or have them graze crop residues. Always have a health management plan. What sort of vaccinations and parasite treatments does that include? And your actual production plan. What sort of breeding and birthing and weaning strategies are you going to want? And how are you going to market your animals? Are you selling primarily non-meat products like eggs and milk, or are you finishing animals for meat? How are you going to get animal replacements, etc.? This seems to be, again, like I said, the easiest step for producers who are already raising livestock to make. But it's important, if you aren't familiar with livestock, to consider all of these things as well. So it's a rough overview of silvopasture, and really what do I want to leave you all with, as you hopefully have learned something today. I really want to emphasize that management plays the key role in silvopasture success. So it's not necessarily a particular thing that you're going to do, it's how you manage all of the things in your system specifically for you. Meaning, again, silvopasture is not prescriptive. It's going to look very different depending on where you are regionally and what type of operation you have. But overall, what's going to make your operation successful is the management. Because it is a complex system and it's going to have complex interactions, we really do need some more regionally specific research. And I hope that's what I can provide to you by being here at UMCA and continuing to work on these research products, because I do want to be able to provide producers with good recommendations on how best to implement silvopasture on their operations. I want to thank you all, if you've gotten to this point, for following along. And I will, if you want to contact me, you can reach me at acconway@missouri.edu. And I look forward to answering any questions that you send my way. Thank you.